Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mr. Anselmi here with another video, this time on South and Southeast Asia. I hope you'll forgive me not being in a suit. At the time of recording, it is 12:43 in the morning. So hopefully you can forgive my casual attire as we talk about four empires in South and Southeast Asia. But before we do, a kind of a note on what we're going to do today. Today is going to be a little bit of big picture history. These are all empires that are centuries long in rule, and each have deep and rich and full histories. There's absolutely no way we're going to be able to cover four complete empires in such a short time. And in fact, AP College Board, for the purposes of our exam, isn't quite interested in that. All four of these empires make up an idea that's talked about as state building in South and Southeast Asia. Now, we're going to talk about how each one of these kind of represents that. And these four empires are among many that are listed as illustrative examples of state and state building. And so we're going to keep kind of a 30,000-foot view here, looking at some of the highlighting important features of each empire as it relates to ideas like trade, changeability, religious identity, and where sources of power come from. So we're going to be talking about four empires, as I've said: the Vijayanagar Empire, the Khmer Empire, the Srivijaya Empire, and the Majapahit Empire. Now, I'll be very honest with you. This is about as far out of my comfort zone within history as I can get. These four empires are four empires that I am aware of, that I teach year over year, but I've really tried to dive into the stories here to bring you something a little more personal on each one. And that's what I love about what we study. Really, if you zoom into any part of the world, you're going to find human beings acting and interacting in really incredible ways with full and rich and interesting characters and stories. So with that, let's look at these four empires. Now it's really important to note these empires, especially when we get to the Khmer, are kind of surrounded, especially for those of us in the West, in mystery. And they're going to get talked about as though they are these very ancient empires, when in actuality that's actually not true. All of these are medieval, equivalent to Middle Ages in Europe, and so these aren't really ancient empires, but in some ways they end up sometimes being discarded. So the Vijayanagar Empire, if you've examined our video on Dar al-Islam, we talked about the spread of Islam out of Mecca and Medina and the Arabian Peninsula, and how Islam was accepted in different regions of the world. One of the ones that we highlighted was in India. And we talked about how there was a region that was called the Delhi Sultanate. And in Delhi, that Islam was successful here in northern India, but had a lot of difficulty spreading down. And there is a point in time, at least at the start of the Vijayanagar, that the Delhi Sultanate had actually made its way pretty rather south, somewhat like, about like that. I'm being rough with my drawings. Now, if we zoom in here, right, as the Delhi Sultanate took up that much land and that much space, it actually spread them too thin. And people of the region kind of banded together. There was groups of kingdoms down here, and they united and kind of fought back and gained their own land, establishing the Vijayanagar Empire. Right now, they're going to spend most of their time. That's too thin. They're going to spend most of their time as this empire, like most empires, growing and expanding, kind of. And contracting when they lose, and they're going to fight over resources, especially in and around these river valleys right here, and that's going to go back and forth. But really, something I want to talk about here is kind of reiterating that point on how and why they were founded. it's important that their identity is Hindu. And Hinduism, if you recall, if you watched our videos on religion, is a very rigid social structure. Now, that rigidity is going to not quite be very accepting of Islam as an idea. And this division of North versus South India is going to continue kind of even till today. There is a great deal of Islam present in Northern India and a great deal of Hinduism present in South, with pockets of Christianity here and there. And so India is sort of divided in its own identity even now, but that Hindu identity is going to be really important. And we're going to see that in examples of architecture here from the Vijayanagar. This is a temple that is constructed in a very standard Hindu fashion. Now, it's going to have, it's tiered almost like a mountain, which is going to be indicative of Hindu theology. And it's going to be completed with what are called bas-reliefs, or bi-reliefs, B-A-S, relief images. Those are going to surround every layer of this mountain. And those are going to be a teaching tool of sorts through these pictographic representations. You're going to see stories of the gods, stories of local day-to-day life, what it might be like as a farmer or a warrior. And then they're going to also have many, many depictions of Hindu gods and goddesses and how they are interacting. That's going to be a place of meditation and a place of worship. And it's going to be almost mathematically perfect, as you can see by its very rigid structure. So I just wanted to look at the Vijayanagar, kind of this Hindu identifying group that's going to fight against the Delhi Sultanate and gain its own land. Now let's move on. We're going to look at Khmer. And the Khmer Empire in 802 and 1430 to 1431 is going to be another mainland empire. Now, the Vijayanagar, obviously, in India. Over here to the east, the Khmer Empire is going to be around modern-day Cambodia, right next to modern-day Vietnam, which is right here. So this is the very southeast of the Southeast Asia that is still mainland Asia. Now, the Khmer Empire, really what we're going to talk about here is the changeability of empire over time. The Khmer, founded in 802 and 1431, is going to be, of the four empires that we're discussing today, by far the most surrounded in mystery and intrigue, mostly because of what is left over by them. Now, the Khmer start out as a Hindu civilization, and as a celebration of that fact, this temple here is going to be built. Now, this is the temple of Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is in Cambodia now, and it is an enormously large temple. It's one of the wonders of the world. It took more stone than the pyramids to construct. And Angkor Wat is built in a Hindu style. You can see these mountaintop looking structures here, but they're going to have their own flair. As rigid as Hinduism is, it is organic like all other things, and there's going to be some change in the Khmer Empire and how it represents itself. It's also going to make use of bas-relief and that same style, but they're going to make it their own. Now, this temple is going to change from a Hindu temple to a Buddhist temple, all within the Khmer Empire. Eventually, it will arguably even change back to a Hindu temple. Khmer Empire is going to change a lot over time, and that's going to go to the leadership. Now, the construction of this temple is incredible because this is actually not only a temple. This is the centermost point of a city. And now we didn't know this about Angkor Wat until the early 2000s, when they started being able to use LiDAR and radar as planes flew over the region to identify that there were thousands of wooden structures of homes, of workshops, of markets all around this city. And actually, they estimate anywhere from 750,000 to 1 million people lived in Angkor. And that is enormous. That's larger than Paris at the time. But because of the changeover from leader to leader, and over time, the kind of the changing of hands, even though the locals always knew that this temple and these there's many temples were there, they actually kind of lose their own identity over time as they forget who it was that actually built them. This is going to lead Europeans, when they finally discovered in the 1500s, to speculate anyone from Alexander the Great to Trajan built them, because there's no way that Cambodia, the Cambodians could have built it. It must have been a European, right? That's going to be their thought. They're going to be disappointed when they eventually figure it out. But yeah, so there's a lot of mystery in and around it because so much changed over time that they couldn't remember it themselves. So we're going to move on and look at the Srivijaya. And the Srivijaya are going to be really exemplary to us. Now, as to how geographically, or how geography, rather, can be so important to the foundation of empire. The Srivijaya are going to be in the archipelago of Indonesia, and they are going to really make their money in one very specific way. Now, if we zoom out here, we're gonna see a little bit of a view, right, of Indonesia. And if we understand, over here is the Indian Ocean, right here is the South China Sea. Now, there's a great deal of trade to be done in and around the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. But to get from one to the other, there's really only one reasonable route to go, and that is through the strait right here. Now, this strait, now known as the Strait of Malacca, is going to be profoundly important, because to get to the South China Sea, otherwise you've got to keep going until you can find another way around, and that's going to cost you time that you don't have, and force you into winds that you don't know. So the Srivijaya are going to build an empire on this geographic feature, right? They're going to control that strait, and whoever comes in and out, they're going to charge a toll for keeping up the strait. Now, in addition to that, this is where many of our spices come from, but specifically the spice of nutmeg, right? Now, I don't know about you, growing up as a Westerner, nutmeg is that thing we use once a year on our eggnog, and even then we could probably do without it. We don't use it a lot in our cooking, typically, in American dishes, but wars are going to be fought over access to nutmeg, because at the time, the sole place where you can get and acquire this spice is going to be right here in this region, is going to be where you can get nutmeg. Wars are going to be fought. People are going to die for access to that spice. Now, if you're wondering why, well, number one, because it's tasty and delicious, but number two, because nutmeg serves kind of like salt as a preservative for meat. So it has a function as a preservative. It also has a function for anybody who's ever eaten boiled, unseasoned meat. Nutmeg's going to be worth its weight in gold, as it were, right? Because of the ability to spice and flavor food. The Srivijaya are going to yield their rule eventually to the Majapahit, and they are going to, we're going to talk about them in a different way. So the Majapahit, if you see here, this is also Indonesia. They're going to control that exact same strait, the Strait of Malacca. And yes, they are going to become enormously wealthy by controlling trade in and out of that strait from the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean. They are going to be the group that unites the Indonesian islands. And they are actually not a very long-lived empire. 1293 to 1517, but really it's kind of less than that. That's the full extent of it. But really their highest reign is going to be about 100 years, a little more than 100 years. But they're going to approach empire in a different way. They are going to approach empire as a sphere of influence rather than conquered territory. Now, let me explain that term for a second. Most of us think of empires as places or people that go around and conquer other places, and those places now serve them, right? That's going to be the model that Persia follows and Rome follows and Macedonia, right? I'm going to conquer, and whatever I conquer, that's mine now. And Majapahit are going to have some of that, right? The dark blue here on this map are going to be places that they conquered. But the light blue are going to be vassal kingdoms that pay tribute or are willing to trade at a better rate with the Majapahit. To them, that is going to still be unifying and important. And they're going to use that trade networking ability to create a trade empire of sorts. And that is going to be, like I said, unifying to Indonesia, to the point of where this is going to be recognized as the first time these islands are really unified. Now, there are thousands of Indonesian islands, the largest, right, being Sumatra, right here. The second largest is Java, right here. Now, the Majapahit are going to be located on the Java island right here. And there are so many interesting, cool stories about the Majapahit. I recommend you go learn about them. Right? If you notice right here, this island is actually divided in half. The western half is known as Sundan. And they're going to never be able to, the Majapahit are going to be able to never conquer Sundan. And tensions are going to still actually going to be there in and around that region, even today, over some very age-old grievances. So I encourage you to read more about them. The Majapahit are also going to practice, and this is their symbol over on the left, they're going to practice Hindu Buddhism. Now, that's not Hinduism, and it's not Buddhism. It's Hindu Buddhism. They're going to take aspects from both Hinduism and Buddhism and create something new. If you remember, we covered this in our idea of what is syncretism and syncretic religions. This is going to be one of those. This is going to take, like I said, lots of ideas from the Hindu and the Buddhist, but it's also going to be filled with ideas like that there can be a god king, or all sorts of other things that very interesting rituals and very interesting practices. And I encourage you to read about them more. So there it is, as quick as I can do it. 4 very different empires in and around the south and southeast region of Asia. And they're going to go about state building in different ways, from everything from trade and influence to geographic exploitation to fighting over natural resources like a standard empire. And all of them are going to be centered in and around the concepts of identity. So hopefully we challenged your idea of what an empire is and what it can look like from place to place. And hopefully we opened your eyes to the fact that really all over the world are these great and big empires, each with their own rich and completely diverse history. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, keep perspective.